Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to a new video. Today we have something a lot more analytical than usual. Now I've been getting asked some questions about like how do I draft my 4th and 5th pick for Cleave? Because that's essentially what most people struggle with. Or I guess not even if you're a Cleaver, like if you're just a regular RTA player in general, your 4th and 5th pick are typically what decides the game. Because your 1, 2, and 3 are usually the same every game, right? It's always your 4 and 5 that determines whether or not you lose. So I just wanted to make this guide for like those type of players that just are struggling. Like this is going to be mainly focused on Cleave, but you can take this concept to standard gameplay as well. Like if you're a standard player struggling against Cleave, you can take ideas from this video and then apply it to your own game. But yeah, essentially, what units have good matchups into what, and bad matchups into what, right? Because all of these units that you see here, mainly being picked on the 4 to 5. I mean, Ludwig like usually is on 3, but I made an exception for him here. You don't see any openers here, right? Because openers are always picked early. You don't see Zio, Rand, Para, Omid, TML, DDR. They're always picked 1, 2, or 3. Nakul, right? She's an exception here. She's usually picked on 4 and 5, even though she's a speed lead. She's mainly a counter pick, right? If you're cleaving. And there's some other ones here like RB and stuff, but like they're not really that good for cleave, so I wouldn't really recommend it. Same with designer, she's not really good anti-cleave, so I'm not even gonna include her, right? So I wanted to keep this list even. That's why we have the same number of units here, like the most common 4 to 5 cleave picks and then the most common anti-cleave. So we're just going to go through each unit. This might be a long video because I have to do this for every unit. And then also take this video with a grain of salt because it's not going to be true 100% for every unit because I'm just going to be speedrunning it. Like, it's just based on my opinion. So, yeah. Let's start with the bottom 2 first. Let's go with it says right here, right? Should always be pre-banned unless using them. Leo Harsetti, like, if you're not using one of these 2, you should always pre-ban, for sure, because they just completely stop your cleave, right? So I'm not even gonna include them here for this list because you should be pre-banning them anyways. Now let's get started. First thing you're gonna be talking about. Let's put the thing here. All right, so we have you have the list here, and then we're gonna talk about the matchups here. So first we're going to be doing Astromancer. Obviously you'd be picking her into counterattacks, right? So when you see stuff like Candy, like she's good matchup into Candy, Albedo, right? Abyssal Euphine, Aiden, like any sort of counterattacker she's good into, right? What she's bad into is stuff that punishes non-attack skills. So stuff like Politis, stuff like Celine, and then also stuff that counters debuffs, so Ed. When you see one of these 3, you pretty much never pick Astromancer. So she's pretty much only delegated to a 5th pick, because if they slam Celine Ed on you, then your Astromancer is completely trapped. So it's really hard to pick Astromancer anything other than 5th. Likewise, she's not terrible into BBK, because she will strip and soulburn ignore ER on the immortality. And as long as you have a different unit that goes after her, then you can just one-shot the Karen. So she's not terrible into BBK. But into Amiki, she's like neutral because she cleanses first, right? It's a little bit weird with her. Senya, it just depends on how much damage you have, right? So that's another neutral pick. She's bad into Bellion as well because you don't get the souls from Unseen Observer. So I don't really like that matchup either. She's neutral into Elena. Like she cuts CR, but no, she doesn't because you have restrict. She does not cut CR. But then like you need a lot of damage to break their Elena, so it's okay for that. Against AOL, technically it's a bad matchup. But usually you're picking a AoE opener along with Astromancer, so it's fine. You just have to pick like Rowana, right? You just have to pick a lot of AoE into it. Oh, let me include Blue Elena here. Okay. A Tywin, right? A Tywin, she's neutral into it, not terrible. Same with Sage Ball. Karina, she's actually pretty good into Karina. Acades, like these CR cutting units, it's just you're not gonna be picking her into them anyways, so they're just neutral. Same with Elena. These are just CR cutting units. So you pick it into these, and then don't pick it into these. And then these, it just depends on your team. So yeah, that's pretty much Astromancer's case. Now let's move on to Commander Pavel. Hopefully you got a screenshot of that one. Okay. So for Cavill, again, he's only used as a 5th pick because he has a lot of bad matchups as well. Like, for example, Candy is a bad matchup because of anti-crit. Actually good into Bellion because he doesn't care about souls, anti-souls, and then he can one-shot the Bellion back. Bad matchup into AOL because obviously AoE skill null. It's actually neutral versus Albedo. Yes, she does mid, but then she doesn't provide any tempo. So if your Cavill can kill the other units, then you're chilling. And usually if your Cavill's real enough, you can still kill even if they have Albedo. So good into Ed, right? Because there's no debuffs. Good into Celine, good into Politis, or kind. Actually, I'll put it at neutral because she does cut CR. So if it's degen Poly and then Poly tanks the S2, then you're just dead. But if it's squishy Politis, then you're fine. Elena's neutral again. If you can one-shot Elena with like a Death Break into a Cavill setup, then it's fine. But if not, then you kind of just die. Acades. Again, this really depends on your team. If you manage to land a double crit setup before she takes her turn, so I'm gonna just leave it there. Right, so obviously Sage Ball will be neutral as well. Cavill, he's good into Cavill. Again, no debuffs required. Senya too. Loki, he's pretty good into Senya. Even though he does proc the backline, Cavill can one-shot Senya, which is or let me correct myself. You can one-shot Senya if you do an S2, S3 into her. So as long as you have enough damage, then it's fine. Aiden's pretty neutral. If she dodges everything, then she just cuts you and you die. Bad matchup into Elena because he's a pen unit, right? And then she also cuts on the S2, so you're just gonna die. Abyssal Yupin also a bad matchup because if she counters you and then you get attacked down, you're dead. And you don't cut CR either, so... Haste is okay. Thing is, right, you just have to kill haste with your S3 and then it's fine, because you're focusing out haste first, so it's not as bad as it seems. For BBK, it's a pretty bad matchup because he has no way to strip the immortality, so you just end up proccing BBK low for free, which means Amiki's also a bad matchup. Karina's technically a bad matchup, so you need to draft like some sort of debuff with him. Again, these are just like 1v1 matchups, right? Like these are just matchups based on the unit alone. So you can like solve a lot of these by just picking other stuff. Like for example, if you see Karina being picked, you can just take like Blitty, right? Or like who's a crit unit that can activate Cavill? Like Judge Kisei, right? Sets up Death Break, but also procs Cavill, and then now this thing's useless, so yeah. You'll also notice that a lot of these units, like, if they're the same archetype, then they kind of lose and win against the same things. Like, BBK and Amiki are pretty similar, so they'll beat units like Cavill, but they'll struggle against units like Rohan, right? So, anyways, let's move on. Also, I didn't include the hard counters for Cavill because they're just purely there for Cavill. Those two units are Elvira and ML Poly, but I'm not even going to include them because kind of a waste. Frida, let's do Frida now. Don't even want to do Frida. She's more of like an opener. I'm not going to do Frida actually. Yeah, put Frida away. Let's do Lionheart. So what is Lionheart good against? Again, a lot of counterattackers. But then she needs Death Break to work, right? So you really need to pair her with like a Rand or something. But if you do, she's good into stuff like Abyssal Euphine. Good into Haste, right? If you Death Break. Right? Really good into Ed. I think that's it. I mean, technically Candy, if you bring a Death Breaker. And I really do think that's it. Her bad matchups, Elenoff, right? Because it's Death Pen unit. Again, AOL's pretty bad. These are all neutral. Like, this really just depends on your team, once again. I guess technically it's a bad matchup for LHC because it's AoE. Albedo's neutral. She has damage mitigation, but she can burn through it if you Death Break, so. Dragon Bride Senya. This is also pretty neutral. Like, she herself isn't a direct counter to LHC, so this doesn't really matter. Bellion. If it's counter Bellion, it's pretty good. If it's 3F, then yeah, I'm gonna just put it neutral because we don't know what the build is. If it's like prot set on 3F, then it's just neutral, not really a hard counter. Amiki, yeah, Amiki's a bad matchup for LHC. Same with BBK again. Karina's okay. Aiden's a pretty good matchup for LHC. Procs off of that, and then even if you miss, you still do a fuck ton of damage to her. So Politics is neutral. Even though she does proc the LHC herself won't get the CR cut as much, so yeah. Good into Celine, right? She'll cut above Celine if you're really fast LHC, and then she'll just end up one-shotting the Celine. As long as the Celine doesn't go onto... No, it doesn't even matter because you just self-cleanse anyways. So. And this is just neutral, so... Something like this is where you would pick LHC, but not into something like one of these. Okay. Now let's talk about Ida. For Ida, she procs off of using a non-attack skill, right? So immediately she has terrible matchups into Celine, terrible matchups into Politis. Technically kind of a bad matchup into Abyssal Euphine because it cuts CR. And then also bad matchup into Elena because it's full AoE, right? What is she good into? She's good into Ed because she's a blue unit. So as long as it misses, then you're chilling. It's a 50-50, right? I guess technically that means it's neutral, so I'll put it at neutral. If you have F, it's technically good into... Oh, I can't even say that. He just cleanses. No, never mind. Amiki's a bad matchup for Ada. Especially because most are on ER anyways. BBK is neutral though, just because BBK builds... Like... There are more non-ER BBK builds than non-ER Amiki builds. So if you fight a non-ER BBK, then Ida does really well into her actually. It's neutral versus AOL. Yes, she does proc, but then since she has 2 turns, right? You can just push back her and then push up your team after, and then she won't move anyone in the CR bar. So actually good matchup into Ilinov because she ends up controlling Ilinov with her stun and her S2 pushback. So that's pretty well. Same with A Taiwan. She ends up getting controlled by Ida. Same with Karina. It's a pretty good matchup. Terrible matchup into Bellion because she's a tag health user. Honestly, a good matchup into Senya too, because even if you don't kill the Senya, right, you'll have skill null on your S2, which means you can actually tank a Senya S3 with 3F, and you won't die. So that's really nice. Terrible matchup into Albedo because she's green, has a crit mitigation, and she ends up taking away the skill null. So that's really annoying. Again, these really just depend on the rest of your team. So decent into haste obviously too, because she ends up getting control. Bad into Aiden, right? It's perma dodge and then she ends up just dying. Candy is pretty neutral. Yes, you do proc a lot of Albrises, but then you have skill node to tank the first one. And then as long as she doesn't salvo like twice in a row, then you end up doing pretty good damage to her. And then you can kill with her follow-ups. So yeah, something like this would be good for Ada's matchups. Okay. Obviously her matchups chart is pretty bad, so that's why you don't really draft her often. Okay. Let's talk about Politis next. I low-key want to put Politis and Rowana in the same category because they kind of do the exact same thing. And they're kind of the same unit. The only difference is Amiki, right? So, you know, I'll just do them separately, but then I will do her next. So, because they're pretty similar. First things first, Politis is pretty good into Ilanov because it cuts her CR cut, and she herself does pretty good damage, so that helps a lot from preventing Ilanov to take a turn. Neutral into Albedo. Neutral into Aiden, it cuts her CR from pushing up, so, and then if you S2, then it's not gonna fuck Aiden's counterattack. Bad into Candy, bad into Bellion because she's a book holder, right? Bad into Amiki, especially. She has no way to strip the immortality consistently. Good into Elena, stops her CR push and procs off of the S2. Neutral into Abyssal Euphine. Not really the politics here, doesn't make sense. Celine. She's good into Celine. Really good into Sage Ball. For BBK, it depends if it's ER or not, right? So we'll put it at neutral. Good into Acades. Really bad into Ed. Neutral into Haste. Depends if it's ER build or not. Good into Ataiwin. Good into Senya. Good into Karina, surprisingly, because it stops her from cutting, right? Her S2 passive. And then good into AOL. So her matchup spread's pretty good. So you'll be drafting Politis a decent amount. She just loses to counterattackers, which is her main thing. So maybe like some of these can be moved up, but it stops their CR though, which is why. And maybe like this, right? This would be a little bit more accurate. So yeah, let's do Rowana next. So for Rowana, these are all true except for Amiki. Amiki ends up being a really good matchup for Rowana because it just resets her. And then Ed is like, you don't really care. It's like neutral pick. Yes, Abyssal stays being a bad matchup. Politis is a bad matchup for Rowana, right? They cut the CR, so it means you have to draft extra turn units for it to push. Good matchup into Albedo because it ignores crit. Pretty bad into Aiden, just because if you're running triple torrent, then Aiden's not really that bad. But if you're running the F build and then you dodge, like she misses on Aiden, and she'll just cut and then kill your Rowana for free. She's neutral into BBK. Honestly, actually pretty good into BBK, surprisingly, because you just strip her immortality and then reset her, so she can't S3, and then you're fine to go from there. Ilanov, she's okay into Ilanov. She does reset and push back, so I guess that's a good matchup actually. Yeah, she can't press any of her buttons. Good into AOL, good into Ataiwin. Okay, bad into Senya because she doesn't care about turn reset, and she does no damage. Senya either. So if she procs her passive, then kind of just dead. Yeah. Good into Karina, right? Good into Katie, Sage Ball, Celine, Elena. Yeah. So this would be something like her matchup chart. So she has a very, very strong pull into these bottom units. So I pick Rowana a ton. She just struggles against counterattackers as well. And then Senya. Okay, let's do Ludwig next. Obviously, bad matchups include pretty much all three of these, all four of these. Good into Aiden and Senya though. Doesn't care about Ed at all. Pretty bad into Haste, just because you're forced to target down Haste, but then if Haste counterattacks your Ludwig, he just dies in one hit, and then he heals your team back to full. So it's really scary with Haste on the field. Elena is like pretty neutral because she does mitigate the S3 damage, but then if you manage to kill her first with like an S1, S2, then she doesn't do anything. I'm good into Celine because he does not care about her passive proccing at all. Stage Ball's neutral, it really just depends on your speed. Karina's also neutral. A-Tywin, yeah, it's fine into A-Tywin. Fine into AOL. Really bad into Elenov because he's a pen unit, and then each turn you take with Ludwig, she just pushes up even more and more, so it's pretty annoying. Bad matchup into this, and into this. Yeah, and then these will be like her good matchups, or his good matchups. Honestly, Politis and AUPN are pretty neutral, just because most Ludwigs are pretty fast, so he'll be able to cut a team even if they have Politis and Eufine. It's not they're picked together, obviously. So. Yeah, something like this, right, would be pretty good for Ludwig's matchup chart. Alright, we're on to Jacko. So, for Jacko, how do I want to do this? Like, the thing about Jacko, right? It's hard to account for S2 buff to the ally, like giving it like the Jacko debuff to like a Ran or Pair or something, because like I'm not including them, right? So I don't know how I'll do Jacko. Like, assuming you have an AoE opener, right? Then all of these units are like just free for Jacko. Like anything that just gets debuffed down. He does struggle into Karina quite a bit. She herself as a unit, right? Because she can't kill. It's hard to kill water units. And then also bad into Ed technically. Then there is a workaround. If you get the stun EE, or not the stun EE, the stun effect on Ed, then he'll just get stunned and then he can't do anything. But that's the only way. But I feel like that's kind of cheating the system because we're just talking about Jacko herself, so yeah. Actually, I'll put Ed at neutral because it is honestly a viable strategy that people do. Elena's usually pretty bad just because you need like hella F to even land on this thing with your opener, and she just ends up cutting and proccing and all that cringe shit, and she's also blue, so it's annoying. Likewise, that's why Bellion's also pretty bad, because if you draft with Rand, then how are you ever landing a debuff, right? Illinois not bad though, because most don't have ER, and then you can end up controlling Illinois after. Oh, but then you don't get damage on the S3, so it's probably more neutral, honestly. Yeah, these are all just... These are all just neutral, honestly. Candy's pretty neutral too. Aiden... Again, if you do get the stun debuff, it's fine. So I'll put her here. Decent into Senya, actually. Good into AOL because you can, if you're running like a single target, then you can just one-shot her. Same with Haste, you can one-shot Haste with Jacko. And then Celine, I mean, she's just bad into Jacko. I think that's what I'll do for Jacko. Okay, let's move on to Caesarea. So again, this is another unit that procs a non-attack skill. So anything that procs off of non-attack skills is instantly a bad matchup. So stuff like Celine, stuff like Politis, right? Edward Elric, pretty bad. Who's she good into? She's good into Ilanov. She's good into Haste, AOL. Elena she's bad into, unless you have like really high F, but this just ends up being an F check battle, right? And then if she counters you, then she ends up cleansing bombs, which is also really annoying. Abyssal's pretty bad because you're attacking so much, like with her soul burns or S3s, right? That she gets her fighting spirit super fast, and she also cuts the CR too. But she's good into Aiden, right? He doesn't care about evasion. Kennedy, she's okay, as long as if you land attack down on Candy, then her damage gets noted a lot. Anytime when she's alright into, usually you're just overloading him with debuffs, so it's fine. Right, Karina, she's good into AOL is a neutral pick actually. Amiki's also pretty neutral. Yeah, Senya's pretty neutral. Bellion she's good into. Albedo she's good into. BBK she's good into. Yeah. The units like that get controlled really easily. She has a really good time against, so yeah. Okay, Blooming Litica. She's really good into Celine, right? Has no non-attack skill to proc. Likewise, she's really good into Politis as well because she does not care about CR push up. She only pushes back, so this becomes a useless pick, which is also the reason why she's a good pick into Abyssal Euphine and Candy. What she's not good into is Empyrean Ilanov because obviously no pen. If you push her back with the S2, she just ends up pushing back up. It's bad into Ed, bad into Elena, right? This is where I'll actually say she's bad into Sage Ball because her S2 doesn't have enough F, which means Katie's also counters her. Okay into A Tywin because you're overloading debuffs. AOL she's okay into. Amiki, she's pretty good into Amiki just because you can control Amiki after with BB or with Blooming Litica, and you also have Skeletal, and you can tank her damage pretty well because your HP scaler, and you're green, so neutral into Senya, right? Yeah, Candy, this is fine. Yeah, Blooming Haze is pretty good for Blooming Litica because if you land on Buffable, he doesn't get his buff anymore. Same with Karina, same with Bellion, Albedo, and BBK. So as long as they don't draft any anti-cleanse against you, Bloody's really strong into all of this. Let's talk about Judge Kisei. So Judge Kisei, what is she good and bad into? She's bad into Ed, Elena, and Ilanov because they will all Ed will just proc and then provoke your whole team. Elena and Ilanov will actually cut after your S2 if you're not playing mid, right? So if you're running like the regular Judge Kisei build, then she'll just get countered by these two. Likewise, she'll also get countered by Ball and Cezanne and Acades because they'll cut after your S2 as well. Honestly, pretty bad into A Tywin too, just because the death buff gets stripped, which means you don't do damage with the S3, so that's pretty rough. Which means she's also pretty bad matchup into AOL, right? Cleanse the death break. Senya, she's okay. Celine, she's good into. Politis, she's bad into. Same with Abyssal. Like these two cut her CR, right? She's good into Amiki. Good into Candy. Good into Aiden, doesn't proc her thingy. Good into Haste, Karina. Bellion's fine. Albedo's fine. BBK's fine. Yeah, all of these are pretty good options. It's just Senya's kind of neutral. Yeah, that's essentially Judge Kisei's matchup chart. Okay, let's do Nockwall. This stays. Elena is a 50-50 because if you hit the Elena, then she does nothing. So, good into Senya, good into Ilanov. This depends on your F, right? Good into this, good into this. Bad into Atawin. Good into AOL. Good into Celine. Yeah, these... Neutral versus Amiki. If you hit Amiki, she also does nothing, so that's nice. Go into Candy. She's neutral versus Aiden because if you miss S3 on Aiden, then she'll counter and potentially one-shot your team. So you have to sacrifice not S3ing or just S2 against an Aiden. Which means Korean is also 50-50 because she's blue. It just depends if you hit or not. Everything else she's good into. Like all this down here, like she does really well against. So yeah. Let's move on to Gala. So Gala's worst matchup is obviously going to be Ilinov, right? He's also bad against Politis, right? It'll proc off her S2, and then she can also control the Gala if she's on Abyssal or something. Celine's a neutral matchup. If you get stunned by Celine's S2, that's really fucked for you, so yeah. Ed's a pretty bad matchup too, just because it's a red versus green, and then Ed can out-sustain your healing, so it's really fucked for her. Likewise, she has a bad matchup against Amiki, even though she's blue. That's because if she counterattacks and procs Tooth twice, your Gala gets one shot, even if she misses, so that's really, really rough. I want to put Selene as a bad matchup, actually, because if this goes on a different DPS than Gala, it doesn't even have to be Gala. If this goes on like your Ludwig, you're just dead, so yeah. Get into Elena because no AoE, and she's blue. This is neutral. Get into Atao and just ends up one-shotting him. This is neutral. Aiden's pretty neutral too. Karina is a bad matchup actually because she can die through a Karina S3 splash if she has death buff. And if she just hits Gala once, she just dies, so yeah, Senya's good, this is good. This is neutral. AOL, she's good into AOL teams. Good into Candy. Haste is neutral. It really depends on the haste HP. If it's anti-Gala, then you're fucked. If it's not, then you're fine. Good into Bellion. Actually bad into Albedo. And BBK, she's neutral against BBK because she'll win the 1v1 as long as you have your buff, but this really just depends on your team comp, so yeah. Good into these and then bad into these up here. Alright, we're almost done. Let's talk about Janua. I'm not gonna include Briar either, so let's just skip that. For Janua, bad into Ilinov, obviously. Against Politis, it's neutral. It depends on the speed, if it's degen or if it's DPS, so it's hard to tell. Really good into Ed, right? Ed just procs him and he just goes crazy, which means also really good into Aiden. Good into Senya. Good into oh, actually Atao is neutral because he can stun the Janua, but then Janua can also one-shot him back if he procs, so yeah. Elena does not care about Elena at all, so that's good for him. Candy's neutral, honestly. It is a way to proc Janua, but anti-crit on the field. Good against Bellion if it's counterattack. Oh, really good into Abyssal Euphine. Neutral into haste. If you hit the haste and he counterattacks you and strips your immortality, you don't get your second part of your S1, and then you just die. So, and then BBK again depends on your team. So yeah, loses to Amiki. Pretty rough into Celine because unless you're running ER, then Celine will just end up stunning you if it hits you and you just die like a dog. Karina is honestly neutral because it's a death scaler, which means Janelle can just one-shot her if he crits. And the rest look okay. Yeah. Let's talk about Sidam. What's Sidam good into? Good into Ilinov, right? Good into Ed, good into not good into this. Good into Senya, Elena, AOL, bad into Bellion. bad into Abyssal, bad into Albedo. Celine is fine. Bad into Amiki, obviously, right? Any CR cutting units is pretty bad. Stage ball is fine, depends on your speed. Good into A Tywin. Bad into Karina. To this. Haze is neutral, and then bad into BBK. So you only draft CDOM if they go like A Tywin AOL Elena, some sort of anti-Ran comp. Then that's when you take CDOM, and then you pick Gala. So you just go for a single target rotation instead. So you don't ran S3, instead you just ran S1. And then your Ludwig will just soul burn a bunch of times, push up the Dominial, and then she'll go kill something. And then go from there. I'm not good at this unit either, because LPK is only picked for flip and save, so... Yeah, I think this is the most common 4 to 5 you'll see for cleavers. And these are going to be the most common anti-cleave, so... Yeah, I just made like a quick short little video that helps you learn the matchups. Like, you'll notice when they draft things that lose to one unit, like for example, if they pick something like a Elena plus I don't even know, Elena plus like Sage Ball, right? Then you can immediately know that Rowana is like the perfect pick, right? Because it counters both of these at the same time, right? So if you're a good drafter, like if you're a good anti-cleave drafter, you would draft units that have completely different archetypes to force the cleaver to address all of them, right? Because if you draft something like this, right, as your anti-cleave, then all the cleaver has to do is just draft this, and then you're down 3 units, because no matter which one you ban, that one other unit just completely counters those 3, right? Which means as the anti-cleaver, you have to draft 3 units that all have different archetypes that lose to separate things. Like for example, you can draft stuff like something like this. Actually, let's do politics as a better example. Something like this, right, would be really annoying for a cleaver to deal with, because it's a counterattacker, a CR cutter, or a CR pusher, right, and a CR cutter all at once. So you can't go Politis to deal with the Sage Ball, because Politis loses to these 2, right? Likewise, you can't go Rowana, because Rowana loses to Abyssal Euphine. But then if you go like Knockle or something, right, to counter these 2, well then if you're drafting Zeo Knockle, then this doesn't counter Sage Ball, because Sage Ball will take the turn in between. So this is just one example. Like just variate your draft where you're not picking the same type of archetype that loses to 1 unit, essentially, is what I'm saying, right? Because as the cleaver, your job is to address what they pick, not you pick preemptively based on what they pick, right? Because if you're doing that, you're just gonna lose, because they can just counter your cleave DPS like super easily, right? So 4 to 5 for cleave is always in response to what they pick. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you're able to get something from this video. If not, just tell me to rack, and then I'll upload something else. And besides that, I hope you enjoyed this. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.